This is going to be in English, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, my Bulgarian comes down to some very, very good friends in Bulgaria. I don't speak the language at all, and I apologize for this. I wish I could. So this is going to be in English, and I hope you can hear me. Shall I share my screen? Is that okay? Okay, as far as I can tell, you can see my screen, and I will be speaking today for the next 2 hours with a break on digital strategy of the museum. First and foremost, well, I would like to thank very much the Regional Center of Sofia, the UNESCO, for this UNESCO project on museums, heritage, tangible and intangible heritage. I think it's a great initiative, and I'm sure that many countries have to learn from what Bulgaria is doing right now with initiatives like this, which I believe are very helpful for museum professionals and everybody that deals with the world of museums. I consider myself one of these many people. I'm currently an associate professor of museum studies in Greece, in Corfu, and I hope to see you all there when we will be able to travel more freely than we can do right now. I have entered the museum world at the beginning as a museum person, as an archaeologist and a museum person. I have archaeological and museum experience in Greece, the Mediterranean, and the Arab world. I'm involved in building museums, in running museums, and in the last many years, teaching about museums and doing research about museums. I'm also the director of the Museology Research Lab in Corfu. And well, we are working towards the digital, because we don't have an option, as it seems. Going digitally is something like a one-way road for museums nowadays, especially after the pandemic. So, well, I'm happy to be today with you and talk about digital strategies, because it seems they are necessary. And I guess that all participants today are interested in putting together a digital strategy for their museum, or make it, let's say, more up-to-date, expanding it, or having the digital as much as possible in their museums. Not that the digital is the solution of every problem we have, not at all, but it is something that, well, we need to take into account. Today's presentation, well, I'm hoping today to present the attributes and the characteristics of the notion of modern museum, museum in the digital world, and digital strategy for museums, and then moving towards strategies, digital strategies for museums in the 21st century, and to stimulate discussion about digital strategies and the future of museums. So the first part of the presentation will be an overview of the modern museum and the digital heritage world. My aim is to introduce you with how museums are nowadays, basically give you my aspect, my insight, and see where digital can fit. And then in the second part of today's presentation, we will be talking about digital strategies for the modern museums. Each and every one of the participants are part of a modern museum. When we say a modern museum, we mean a museum nowadays, a museum that tries to cope and do the best and offer as much as possible. So again, I repeat, we will start about the characteristics of the modern museum, what we expect from a modern museum, and then see how digital can fit into it. So here we go. Right. I'm sure you have seen it many, many times. I have seen this definition a lot of times in how museums work, in professionals' files, in students' dissertations, and I'm sure that, well, most of us have it in mind all the time. It's a starting post. It's what ICOM believes that museums are nowadays in terms of a definition. Well, not really nowadays, because we are into a certain process right now. We will be talking about it in a while, but it's a starting post. So, according to the International Council of Museums, a museum today needs to be non-profit, well, is expected to be non-profit. ICOM is the umbrella of museums, but I mean, it's up to each and every museum what they do, and up to each and every country what decisions they make about their museums. So a museum, let's say, according to ICOM, should be non-profit, should be a permanent institution, should be serving the society in its development, and should be open to the public. So a modern museum has the characteristics of non-profit, permanency, society-driven and directed and open to the public. It does specific jobs. It acquires, conserves, researches, communicates, and exhibits tangible and intangible heritage of humanity and its environment. So according again to ICOM, well, the museum nowadays needs, well, that's what museums do. They do research and they communicate their collections, which are collections of tangible or intangible heritage. And they do it to educate, to help towards study, as well as towards enjoyment, in order to have fun. So this, let's say, 5-line definition, well, shows us what we expect from a museum. That was initiated in the beginning of the 21st century, and it was confirmed in about 2007. That is 15 years ago. Okay, and well, it's straightforward. We understand that museums collect stuff and they show them, and they do it to educate, for study, and for enjoyment. Well, in 2016, 6 years ago, ICOM decided in Milan, in their General Assembly, that this very definition, it's okay, but needs to change. We need to add new things to what a museum is. So they had a committee to prepare a new definition. And that new definition of museums was there in the next conference of ICOM in 2019, about 3 years ago in Kyoto, in Japan. And well, the new definition, the proposed definition is, well, what you see on the screen. So, well, according to this, I have highlighted important words. Museums are democratizing inclusive polyphonic spaces for critical dialogue. Yes, they hold artifacts and everything as the previous definition, but they have to guarantee equal rights and equal access to heritage for all people. They are not for profit, they are participatory, transparent, working with and for different communities, not for one and only community. And they contribute to human dignity, social justice, global equality, and planetary well-being. So in 2019, well, ICOM members, including myself in Kyoto, were asked to say if we are okay for this new definition as opposed to the previous one. It went 70-30. The new definition did not pass. Museum people from all over the world, most probably people from ICOM Bulgaria were in Kyoto at the time. Maybe some of you were there and you remember. We had a big discussion about the new definition. And we all believed that it is on the right track, this new definition, but there were some things missing. People argued that, well, the educational aspect is not allowed into this definition. Also, the digital aspect is not there. And yes, we can read access to heritage for all people. We can read polyphonic spaces. We can read inclusive and participatory. And we know that the digital helps well towards that. But we do not see the word digital there. It was one of the arguments 3 years ago in Kyoto. So, well, in Kyoto, ICOM decided to keep working on it. And we all have a chance still to contribute. If you go to the ICOM's web space, you can contribute towards what do you believe should be in the new definition. The next assembly, the next big assembly of ICOM is this year in August in Prague, in the Czech Republic, which is closer to both Greece and Bulgaria. And we expect in Prague to come up with a new definition, which is going to be an updated version of, well, what you see here. This is what we expect. Will we see digital there? If we press the button and we go back to 2019, yes, imagine a few months before the pandemic, we would have a definition without digital. And the pandemic has completely changed how museums work and made digital, well, a really important part. Not that it was not there before. And again, I repeat, not that the digital can save everything or save museums, but it is definitely something, well, we need. So, well, I go back to the previous slide. From that, non-profit, permanent, open to public, with certain jobs towards education, study, and enjoyment, it seems that we move towards a museum which needs to be inclusive, polyphonic, with critical dialogue, participatory, working with and for diverse communities, therefore not just one aspect, not just one narrative, but many narratives, trying to help not just for education, study, and enjoyment, but also for human dignity, social justice, global equality, and planetary well-being. So it seems that the modern museum has a bigger job to do. That includes, let's say, a more dynamic approach to society. Well, we can imagine that it's not very easy in the physical space to have more than 1 or 2 or 3 narratives in a museum. You can only have 1, 2, 3 exhibitions in the 2, 3, 4, 10 rooms that a museum may have. The digital world can help towards more narratives. The digital world can help towards all these, if we manage to make the right decisions and if we manage to control this vast amount of the digital world. And apart from that, what the officials say, museums need also to take into account what simple people say about the museum, how we perceive the museum. What is the museum for people? Well, here are some ideas of what people think. A very, very big place with lots of stuff on the walls and on the ground. Some of them have nice colors. A 5-year-old boy or girl. A house which has very old things inside. Some of them, I guess, belong to my grandpa. It's a place where people come and put their sculptures so that everyone can see. A place with lots of exhibits where people pay a ticket to get in. My God, you have to pay a ticket. That's what the 10-year-old says. Non-profit, well, was the main argument of the museum. Well, having a ticket doesn't mean that you are not non-profit, of course, but well, we have to take that into account. A really cool place to play football, says a 6-year-old. Yeah. Okay, I mean, that doesn't mean that we have to transform a room we have to a football pitch in a museum, but well, we need to take into account what simple people believe, like us. What we believe about the museum. Yeah. I asked this question to my students and I received different answers from The museum is a very boring place. The museum is a place that we have to go and we must go. The museum is an amazing place. I remember a lady has told me, this is the place I met my husband. This is what she told, well, 15 years ago. I hope she says the same thing today. But we have different perceptions about museums. So we have to take all of this into account towards what we want from our museum. And therefore, to see how we can make the most of, well, the digital aspect. Yeah. Okay, and museums. Well, here we are. We have some really big museums in the world. Well, I'm sure you recognize, well, some of them. Definitely the Louvre, which is the most visited museum in the world. Well, the Hermitage St. Petersburg Museum, well, in the middle, the big, well, Russian museum. Well, talking about Russia nowadays, after 13 days of war, my God, maybe we're entering a period that museums will need to change again, how they see things, yeah. And the whole world may try to see things again. The Guggenheim in Bilbao, well, the British Museum in London, an old picture, well, the Acropolis Museum in Athens, well, I had to put something from Greece, well, as you realize. And also we have some museums that are very big now and very luxurious. New museums in the Arab world. Well, you can see on the left, the new National Museum in Doha, which represents the desert rose, which is some crystals that are formed in the desert, and the museum is within those crystals. And the big Louvre Abu Dhabi Museum, well, connecting through money, heritage, universalism, the Louvre, and well, the big, well, Abu Dhabi Museum. What, well, we see there. What else? But well, at the same time, we have the so-called pandemic phase of museums. The dinosaurs didn't have to put a mask, like in the picture. Well, but well, this is how museums well looked like during the pandemic. Top left, the Metropolitan Museum in New York. You can see social distancing and people. And well, during the pandemic, we also had museums like the top right, empty, closed as physical spaces, simply because it was not possible or safe to people, well, to get into the museum. Well, if you ask my opinion, it was safe to go to the supermarket. I don't know why museums were closed. Wasn't it that difficult to arrange museum visits during the pandemic? But anyway, I mean, this is a political decision. For the first time, actually, museums were there working, but empty. Even from the very beginnings of the new museum, you can see on the top left how the Louvre Museum, well, we believe it was when it opened to the public in, well, the late 18th century. Well, so the pandemic was a phase that definitely affected how, well, we do things. This is a pandemic statistic from NEMO in 2022. The reason why I show it to you, well, you can see these graphs. The blue one is yes, the orange one is no, and the gray one is not sure. And you can see here in the third and the fourth that during the pandemic, museums in Europe changed the tasks that their staff needed to do, a big blue there. And well, they did not hire new staff to do digital, to do new things that were required for the pandemic. That shows that many museums had to adapt with what they had. They actually invested in their staff skills in order to deal with the situation. Well, according to this. And well, not only big museums did that, but also, well, museums that are ordinary, museums closer to what we have in mind, museums that are in the cities well, we live in. Here are some museums from where I come from Ioannina in northwestern Greece. We have historical museums, we have crafts museums, we have symbol art galleries, like each and every city. And what we have in those museums are objects like, I'm just showing you a picture again from a folklore museum, from symbol objects and pictures and stuff like that. And this is what, well, we need to deal with for our museums. And these new situations will have affected and affect every single museum all over the world. So every single museum need to follow the ICOM rules and the suggestions, and the new thing. Every museum suffered from the pandemic. Every museum, it seems, well, that needs to go digital in order to cope. Right. So the digital museum and the digital cultural heritage. Well, we created this about a year ago. Basically, we put the word museum on the internet, and we asked the internet to create a cloud of words that relate to museum. Now, the bigger the word, the most frequent it was on the net. And you see that a year ago, the word digital is the biggest, together with the word data. You see the word data on the right? Yeah, maybe you can see. I'll use my mouse. Yeah, here, data. Digital, big words. Okay, the biggest is museum. Visitors is also a big word, indicating that visitors, well, are important in the digital world. The word app is also there. We see collections, we see exhibitions, we see mobile, we see cultural, we see other big words. But I mean, from just looking at this word cloud, we understand that, well, digital is important. Data, well, have become very important in the museum world today. Right. Okay. And well, what do we mean by that? Yeah. In 2016, 6 years ago, there was a theme conference for museums in Milan, the big ICOM conference again. And the idea was to approach the museum as a predator, as a museum trying to get things, the museosaur, as I well see here. And in a way to try to find out what museums are looking for in the years to come. I repeat, that was in 2016. So what was the prey for museums? What was the precious prey that museums as predators were after? And yes, museums want exhibits. They want visitors and e-visitors. They want numbers. We need visitors' numbers. We want visitors to come to our museums. We need funding. This is #1 thing that museums are asking today. And yes, we need ideas, we need participation, we need different views, we need comments, we need people's attention, time, we need time. Museums need to provide inspiration and get inspiration towards creating new things. Enjoyment is important, of course, and involvement. All these relate to things that museums want. And yes, evaluation and assessment is there so that museums can check if, to an extent, well, they do a good job. And in the next few slides, well, I will try to present you with digital aspects that kind of put together what museums can do today, simply because in order to put together a strategy, we need to be sure of what we are, where we want to go. This is why we have discussed the definitions and everything. And what is there for us? What do we mean, well, by digital? So let me, well, give you a few slides. Right, the past. My God, when I was 15 years old, I got one of these computers. I was very happy to get one of them. And actually, my God, at the time, all my friends were very jealous because my computer had a hard disk of 20 megabytes. Right, 20 megabytes. And that was about 30 years ago. Today, well, all this is the past. And I'm sure that many of you have come across issues, what to do with these machines that are old nowadays. We have started having museums of computers and museums of technology, and well, most of them can serve as exhibits. But well, these really big screens and these really big boxes and all the space they take and the really big printers are now a thing of the past. it was kind of the beginning, well, towards this. Nowadays, it seems that, well, in terms of hardware, in terms of what we need, sometimes a mobile phone is enough, a laptop, a simple computer. And this is there, well, to remind us, well, where all this has started from. And I'm not giving you the first phase. This is the phase that computers became personal. There was a phase before that, that we had really, really big computers. And museums started having big, really, really big computers. Well, why? The answer is classification and taxonomies. Today, when we think of digital, we think of applications. We think of augmented reality, of virtual reality. They come later in the presentation in the next few minutes. Well, in order to have them, as well as why the whole thing started, was simply because the museum wanted to put an order, to classify, to make a list of what they have, to have a catalog that they can work on. Paper catalogs and book catalogs were problematic because when you wanted to add something, you should have to add papers, or you should, it was not very practical. With a computer, from the early age of computers in museums, even before what I showed you as past, before these computers we had at home and now we get rid of them, it's classification and taxonomies that were important for museums so that they can classify what they have, so that they know what they have, and they can collect information about what they have. This is still a very big need today. I don't know a lot about what is happening in Bulgaria, but judging from what it happens in Greece, most museums do not have full catalogs and do not have information systems that they can put things there. They can change them, they can document things, they can add information, they can retrieve information easily. So again, number one thing, as it seems in museums, not just in Greece or Bulgaria or the States or other countries, are in need to be able to classify, to be able to do taxonomies. And the first and most important, we can say, digital application in this digital habitat is documentation, digitizations, repositories, and metadata. Museums need to have screens like this, of folders in which they have their documents that relate to the objects, photographs of the objects, as we see in the top left, descriptions of the objects, information that museum people input and researchers come later and add and add and add. Museums need systems and repositories to have all their collections into them. And yes, okay, the repositories will look like, you know, the top left, the XML, that's the language computers understand better in the museum world. And well, this is why I have the top, the bottom right screen here. But while a documentation system, a repository, a metadata system is something we need, it's the starting post. This is where museums start. If this is problematic, then there's no way we can have augmented reality applications and virtual reality and 3Ds and all the wonderful things we see in the museum. This is kind of, well, the starting post, information management and digital information management. Also, well, we want computers to communicate. We want our museum to be able to see what a museum in the next city, what they have, what a museum in the other side of Europe, what a museum in the other side of the world would need. So it seems we need a uniform documentation system or a conceptual model, and this is what CDOC CRM well is trying to do. The same way you go to a library all over the world and the record of the book is more or less the same, based upon the same principles, libraries have achieved to have a uniformity in their systems. Museums are not there yet. We're working towards this. By this system, the CDOC CRM, the documentation community of ICOM and the world, well, are trying to have one system that can help towards linking museums together and achieve the so-called interoperability. Initiatives towards this, connecting museums in a country, in a continent, like in Europe, all over the world, well, are there. And yes, actually, this is what, well, I would like to show you now. It's the Europeana, the Global Memory Net, the Internet Memory Research. These are initiatives trying to link all museums together. In order to be able for these initiatives to work, we need documentation and we need a common system. We need metadata. We need to invest towards this. That way we connect our museum to the world. So maybe that can be among the first priorities towards a digital strategy. We will discuss later about how we put together this digital strategy. But it seems within this spectrum of documentation, digitization, and repositories, and within systems trying to put everything in one place through a common system, well, we have the notion of being digital quite early in the 21st century. And the question of, well, are we digital enough is still there. This slide is again an old slide. It was made in 2016, 6 years ago. It relates to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, a museum that decided back in 2016 to digitize their collection. So in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, in 2016, they said, our ambition is to digitize the entire collection, everything we have, about 1 million objects by 2020. So they wanted from 2016 until 2020 to digitize everything they have, to create a digital copy of every single object in the museum. And in 2016, well, they had done 25%, as you can see in the slide. They had almost finished with paintings and ship models. They have done 95% of them. They had a lot of work to do for prints, furniture, and military artifacts. So you see they were 25%, 30%, 40% into that. So the Rijksmuseum, they didn't do it. They didn't finish digitizing everything in 2020. They finished in 2019. In 2019, the entire collection was fully digital. And they decided to offer it online to whoever is interested in big files. So from 2019 until today, and that will keep on, if you need a digital copy of a museum object that it is in the Rijksmuseum, you just get online and you download it. And you can make it as big as, and you can have it as big as you want. Not just in a small, not just a few megabytes, but really as big as you want. The Rijksmuseum took that strategic decision in 2016 to digitize and offer everything, to overcome issues of, is it safe? Is it okay to upload everything? Would that have an effect to the museum as it works? Will people want to visit our museum if we digitize and give everything? Well, they took the risk. A strategy involves risks. You can never be sure what will come in the future. And the last few years can confirm this, the pandemic and now the war. They took that decision. Right now, you can see bits and pieces of the Rijksmuseum collection in places that you cannot imagine. The 10-year-old boy at the beginning of the presentation on the slide told us that a museum is a nice place to play football. Well, the Rijksmuseum came with an agreement with the Football Association in Holland, in the Netherlands. And it's been 2 years now that on the football, the actual football that players play, football, you can see a painting of the museum. They put a painting on the ball. So that way, well, every little kid that has a football that is used in the tournaments in the Netherlands, well, has also an object, well, a copy of an object of well, the Rijksmuseum. So you see, I mean, a decision that well was made. They took the decision based upon the assumption, not the assumption, the reality that digital technologies have advanced a lot and people should be able to use it. We should not, we should allow people to use it. That was the idea. Well, on the left, well, you can see two Michelangelo sculptures, well, the same actually, David. And the first one is a digital photo, and the second one is a 3D replica. And you can see how close they are. I mean, they are kind of exactly the same. That shows what, well, new technologies can do. So, well, the Rijksmuseums are fully digital. Is this a name for our museum too? It's up to us to decide. I've talked about the sharing aspect and the initiatives towards sharing museum objects, well, all over the world. Now, if we get into the museum, well, we have noticed in the last 20, 30 years that people, well, they love seeing a screen and they love something digital. Yeah. Well, I like showing the picture here that there's one person admiring a painting and a lot of others going to a window to see a screen at the other on the other building. So museum decided to invest towards new technologies within the museum. And we have museum cases, like in the Railway Museum in London, that they exhibit something that is digital. So there's what is in here, it's digital, it's not a real object. Next to it, in the Byzantine and Christian Museum of Athens, the three objects you see here are holograms. They are not the real objects because the real objects need to be out for conservation. So they decided, let's put some digital replicas so that people can at least have an idea of, well, what was there. The digital also helped the museums being more active and participatory. And you can see a project, a 10-year-old project on the right of helping Phidias putting together the big ancient Greek sculptures he would create at the time. And we also have robots in museums, the so-called animatronics. And well, we know them as dinosaurs most of the time, that they move and so on and so forth. But you can have robotic puppets, like looking like people, and you can have them in your museum as exhibits. So here are some other ideas: 3D modeling, holograms, animatronics, new technologies that museums use in their exhibitions. What else is there? I'm sure you're familiar with it. Websites and portals and virtual museums and virtual tours. We have all got really familiar with them in the last 2 years. And well, you can have a visit in a museum that it's already there. You see on the top left, the Acropolis Museum, and how you can navigate into it through the so-called Google Art project at the time, Arts Google right now. As web museums and web portals, you can also have museums that do not really exist. And you can see on the bottom left, a museum of food. So it's only digital. It's not a replica of a real museum. And yes, you can have online, you can create, well, the museum you want. Also, you can create new realities in a museum, the virtual one and the augmented one. You put a cask and suddenly the whole room becomes something else. And you can put gloves and you can touch things, as well you can see in these pictures. Or augmented reality. We can take our mobile phone, put it in front of the object, as you can see in the picture at the bottom. And instead of one statue with no legs and no arms, in front of your screen, you have the statue as it used to be. And you can have the statue speaking or adding information. Augment the reality you have in front of you. So you start from the reality and you augment it through, well, your computer. That's, well, another thing we can do. And games, absolutely. Yes, people love games. Enjoyment was in the first definition we have seen. Children giving their own definitions, well, they were into games. And well, to an extent, well, we all want to play, and the whole thing becomes better if there's a gaming aspect into it. Tourists, visitors would love to get into a Van Gogh painting, as our friend in the top right. And sometimes, well, they would like to solve a mystery in a museum. And we have museums becoming escape rooms, like the museum of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, that well, has become a place of a murder to be solved by visitors. And yes, we have simple games of painting something or participating in something. So digital technologies can help well towards this investment. Also, video games. Museums have an important role. Sometimes museums have an important role in video games. So you can get, it's a project actually, it's a new international project, this one, how we can use museums in the digital world in different ways. And one of them is in video games. And I'm sure that if you are part of the video games world, maybe sometimes museums come in mind. When you play, you have your character trying to solve a mystery or trying to find a solution to something, moving from one place to another. They get into museums and they get into situations like this. And we had that for many, many years now. Well, here's another digital aspect. Also, a second life. I don't know if you are familiar with this platform. It's a platform that allows you to create a completely different life. And you can see an example here of the most ancient city in the world, according to what archaeologists believe, Ur. It's there digitally. They have created an environment, and you can create a character, the so-called avatar, and live in Ur. Sleep, work, move around, meet people, having discussions, and so on and so forth. So the Second Life is a platform that includes also museums. And big museums are also trying now to have a replica into that Second Life platform. Well, what else you can do with digital? It seems that curation is not enough. We need co-curation nowadays. In order to be inclusive and participatory, museums need and want to involve their audience. They want to create exhibitions, not for the audience, but together with the audience and together with visitors. I'll be more specific with this example from something that, well, we have created in Greece. I don't know if you have visited the island of Rhodes in the southeast Greece, in the Dodecanese. Well, there's a place there called Paradisi, and you can see a nice building. It's the top left. This is a school. So, well, a school teacher, Nasia, music teacher, well, she wanted to have a project with their music, with their student. It's a high school, students of 12, 13 years old. So we were talking about it and we decided, shall we put together a museum with traditional musical instruments for children from Rhodes, from that island? I'm sure children would like that. And we said, yes, well, let's go for it. Let's try to think about it. And then we thought, why don't we ask them? Why don't involve children themselves on the whole process? So we asked them, we said, look, we want to create a museum for you. We want to create a digital museum of traditional musical instruments for children. And we have these ideas. What do you think? Their replies were completely different of what we had in mind. So we decided to work together. We had in mind to have a building, a modern building with modern design, nice colors, thinking that this would attract them. Well, they said, no. As a museum building, we want our school. this is what we want. So, okay, we co-curate. We do not curate as experts. We co-curate with you. Let's agree and try to do it. So as a building, we decided to have their building. And you can see the replicas we created here on the screen. It was a co-curation decision. They made, they were very happy about it. And as it seems, it was more successful than what we initially thought as curators that would be good for them. In terms of musical instruments, we were thinking of traditional guitars, like the Greek bouzoukis and stuff, which is not just Greek, on the contrary. Some other instruments that a pipe or something like that. Students told us, well, no, we want 1, 2, 3 instruments. What you can see in the center of the screen. Actually, the right one in the center of the screen, this one here, I hope you can see my mouse. It is just 2 spoons. So as children, they would play with 2 spoons. This was their favorite musical instrument at the time, having 2 spoons and hitting them. And anyway, we decided to choose these musical instruments, and students did the research. They found information about the instruments. They created videos. They even created a puzzle game, as you can see them play on the bottom right aspect of the screen. So, the digital world helped us co-curate, which is involving visitors and the audience towards, what we want to do. And yes, 2022, what would we be without social media? Yeah, sometimes we wonder how we could communicate 20 and 30 years ago without social media and without Messenger, WhatsApp, Viber, and Twitter, Instagram, TikTok lately, and so on and so forth. Social media have become crucial to every institution and to an extent to us today. And museums, need to invest in that. Museums so far, they keep the traditional way when it comes to social media. Most of them have Facebook accounts. In the last few years, Twitter and Instagram follow. Also, museums have YouTube channels in order to exhibit their things they do in the museum, a lecture, an educational program, something they organize there. They are not very active, but they are. Basically, they use social media to advertise. Yeah. Nowadays, social media are quite crucial in how museums, do their job in general. So another area we should, consider investing into. What else is there, again, through the digital world? It seems that the digital can help us towards emotions and sentiments. Here is a project on sentiment analysis for museums based upon social media comments. Sentiment analysis is a tool used by companies trying to find out if their clients, in our case, visitors, were happy or unhappy by the service the company provides, by the services, museum provide. Yeah. So by having a computer checking words and phrases from what people upload on social media every day, they can provide the museum with an idea of whether on a specific day people were happy or unhappy. Here's a system that we have created in that direction. It's the Sensium data dashboard. On the top left, you have a list of museums that participate in this experiment. You can choose a date range from the beginning of October until the beginning of December 2021, you may say. You can choose on the right the museum that you want to see the sentiment into that museum. And the computer will provide something like what you have at the bottom of the screen. The blue line is one museum, the red line is another museum. So what does the computer do? Well, the computer would check a comment. Okay, can you see the comment with a happy score? High score 9. So if you see a comment, the museum is located in a beautiful building with a stunning architecture, especially the new roofed area. The museum has lots of brilliant exhibits. You see a lot of words that relate to beautiful buildings, brilliant, excellent. So it seems that this is a happy comment. It gets a high score. A comment similar to the one on the left, too much things from Egypt, not good as rated if compared to museums in Paris, Rome, definitely disappointed. It's a comment from someone who, well, was not very happy. And if you come a comment like the one in the middle, hard to believe a museum could hold many wonderful subject areas, well displayed, very clean and safe. You should plan plenty of time, like most of the day, a wonderful experience. Well, the computer would take this comment as a neutral comment. It's not really very happy, but it's not that unhappy at the same time. And by collecting these comments from social media accounts, well, it offers what you see on the bottom. And this line is actually represents every day of the museum and how the museum works. For example, you see that one day down here, well, people were not very happy about what they saw in the museum. And when you see really this line going up, well, it means that people were happy on the day. Where we have the blue and the red line, here we have two museums, one museum blue, another one red. So a museum can check how they do in relation to their competition. So, well, an example here, oh, sorry. I'm losing my mouse. Yeah, an example here, for example, shows that the Blue Museum on the 6th of December 2017, visitors were not very happy, while the Red Museums, well, they were kind of neutral towards happy. Another example is here at the end. You see the Red Museum, well, scoring really low, while the Blue Museum scoring high. Yes, this tool is not an answer to everything, not at all, but it's a tool. And it's a tool that has been developed through the digital world, making the most of social media and comments that people upload. TripAdvisor, Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth. Yes, it takes into account only the comments that are uploaded into the museum's account, because I mean, it's not ethical to access a personal social media accounts unless you have permission to do this. But the official museum account can be used to, well, to create, well, something like that, simply because we live in the world of data. And it seems that data get more and more and more. People go to a museum, they take pictures, they upload comments, they share content, they make stories, they create videos. So that adds a lot of data again and again and again. One of the latest developments in the digital museum world is the museum big data. It seems that these data we have are so many that it's impossible to deal with them manually, as we say. We need an algorithm. We need ways in order to make the most of, well, the data a museum have, or museums have. And in the world of museum big data, there are opportunities and new tools for museums to make the most of them. Right. Okay, I'll try to put that on the chat box so that I'll stop sharing. I'll use the chat. I'll share with you this video. And well, the title, I'll share again, I think. Just give me a second. I'll share my screen again. This one. as you see, the title of my slide is Be an Artwork. So it's an example of not just seeing, not just admiring, not just having fun, not just collecting data and commenting, but how ourselves can be artworks within the digital world. It's better to see the video rather than me talking about it. And I have it here so that we can combine seeing the video with a little bit of a break. So, well, it's almost 3 o'clock. It will take you about 4 minutes to see the video. And shall we have also a 10-minute break so that we can be a bit away from the screen? Is it okay to be back at maybe 3:15? Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll put it on the chat. Back at 15:15. Make sure you watch the video. Okay, so I will mute myself and I'll close my camera for our break, and we will be back in about 15 minutes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your attention so far. Hello again. Let me share my screen. Yep, we are here. Sharing it. Okay. I hope you had some minutes of your screen. I hope you have also seen the video, which indicates how a museum can use their digital collection and make an artwork out of it by using, in a positive way, the audience, the visitors. The visitors can play with the exhibits, put them on their heads, relate to them, do things with them, and it's a wonderful experience. From Artland's gallery in the Cleveland Museum of Art, they have invested towards making it in the last 10 or 15 years. This big wall that you have seen in the video, and visitors could actually catch objects, play with them, put them there, and so on and so forth. Yeah. All these examples I've tried to show in the first part of so far in today's, let's say, lecture or seminar or talk. I just wanted to give you an insight towards what is there, and what, to an extent, I consider more important, starting from digitization and documentation. By far, this is the most important, and moving all the way to visitors being artworks, co-curation, games and video games, sentiment analysis, museum big data, social media, and so on and so forth. And new things are added every day in our digital possibilities, as it seems. Yes, it moves really, really fast. And we need to follow, but we do not really must follow. It is up to us what we want to do. If you have any questions on what has been presented so far, raise your hand, let me know. Feel free to interrupt. I know it's when something is happening through a screen is more difficult. I wish I could be there, but I mean, I will repeat that at the end of the lecture. But if you feel that I or my university or the team can help you in your museums towards the digital aspect or any other aspect, feel free to contact me. I have my email at the bottom of every slide, and the contact details are there. So let's discuss now a bit about strategy. Yeah. Okay, because we've seen what is there. We've seen what is expected from a modern museum. the approaches of ICOM and people and inclusivity, participation, something important for the world, the diverse communities, place for democracy, dialogue, and everything. And definitely taking care of the objects we collect, both tangible and intangible. But well, we need to put together a strategy. Yeah. So, well, the big question is, what is this thing called a strategy? What is a strategy? Yeah. Well, strategy from the Greek word of strategos, meaning the leader of the army. We shouldn't be talking about armies nowadays, unfortunately, but well, we have to talk about strategies. So strategy basically means, well, a well-based plan. A strategos, a leader of an army, should always have a plan on how to attack the enemy in order to succeed. And that plan involves ideas, involves power, involves imagination sometimes, involves data. Well, I like this phrase from Richard Rummelt. The kernel of the strategy, the core of the strategy, has three elements: diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent action. So basically, in order to have a strategy, and the strategy is the outcome of a good diagnosis, what we have and what is the problem. A guiding policy, how we deal with that, how we think of dealing with that, and then do it. Coherent action. Not action by one person, not action by just a few days. Something coherent that involves the whole organization, that takes time, that it is not something that we do in a rush, that it is not something that we kind of thinking that it's a matter of a few minutes to finish. So strategy is long-term. We diagnose the situation, we plan, and we execute. Yeah. So diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent action. A museum usually has a strategy. It is part of the vision and the mission of the museum. So a museum is supposed to have a vision, what they want to become, a mission to accomplish that relates to exhibiting the objects, satisfying customers, providing narratives, and whatever else the mission may be. And the strategy is how we do them. What are our policies and what are our actions? So when we are talking about the strategy, it means, well, exactly that. Now in the digital world, a strategy, yeah. The goal of a strategy is a statement of vision with objectives for the museum's digital programs based on evidence, owned by leadership, backed up by adequate academic resources, and used as a guide by management and operation. So our digital strategy, in other words, our strategy in the digital world, relates to what digital programs we want our museums to have. Based on evidence, what we want, what we need, what we have, evidence. The leadership needs to be involved. A digital strategy, it is not the job of one person. Oh, John, you are in charge of the digital in our museum. The digital strategy is yours. No. The digital strategy involves the whole organization, so the director needs to be involved, or whoever does the job of the director. And the whole museum needs to be involved. If there's a job of one person, then that person, well, no matter how good he or she may be, it is unlikely to be successful because only the leadership has an overall idea about how the museum works. So you need to involve the leadership. It doesn't mean that the leader should do it, but the leader has to approve it, has to make sure that it relates to all aspects of the museum. Problematic strategies in many museums all over the world related exactly to the fact that they ended up being the job of one person. John, you are an expert on that. Helen, you are amazing with computers. So help us, tell us what to do. Well, Helen may be amazing with computers and she may have some wonderful ideas, but Helen does not necessarily have the overall picture of what is going on in the museum. This is what you get from other departments, and this is what you get from the leader or the leading team. I see something on the chat, just let me check. Yes, there is a question here on how we managed to do your digitization. That yes, we are familiar with the new age, we are familiar with what is there, but well, how we do it. If you can wait for a few minutes, it is part of what we are going to show. This is a decision-making process rather than, and it needs to involve not just digitization, but I repeat, what the museum wants to do. In other words, we need to have an overall picture of what is there and decide what, well, we would like to do. Let's get to the meat of the whole thing on how to achieve that. So here I have a number of steps towards creating a digital strategy. So, well, we start from the museum's overall strategy. What is the overall strategy of the museum? What the museums want to achieve? What are the vision, the mission, and the objectives of the museum? The second aspect is, well, to understand the need of digital strategy, not to accept it, not just to say, yes, we need to be digital, but understand why we want to be digital within the aims of the objectives of the museum. Let me give you an example here of a museum that doesn't need to be digital. All over Europe, we have small museums in villages that they operate in specific periods of time, usually during August or Easter or Christmas, where people are in the village. And the aim of this museum is to offer people visiting the village, people that are there during their holidays, an idea of how the museum was in the past. This is the only strategy the museum has. Only this. This doesn't need to be digital. There's no need for this museum to have a digital strategy because the overall strategy relates to something that, well, the digital, well, is not relevant. If they decide to move a step forward, then it's a different thing, and then they have to get digital. So we have to understand if and to what extent, well, we need to be digital. Then the next step is to involve the museum leadership, to get the director involved towards building the strategy together, simply because leadership has the overall idea of what the museum wants to achieve and can help a lot. Then, well, we list the digital aspect and programs as they currently are. So right now, what is the digital aspect of the museum we have? We may have a website that doesn't work really well. Fine, we note it down. We have Facebook accounts. We have a digitization program that started 3 years ago and then it stopped. It's there. We have digital pictures. Whatever we have, we need to list. Yeah, so that we actually know what we have already. Then the next step is to go to every single department of the museum and see what they need, how our strategy will be relevant to them. Only if we get their input and their approach towards our digital strategy, we will be able to have one that can work. Because we may decide to go for a digitization program to search for a information system, and that's the next step, research on the museum's digital needs. Find the information system which is best. And well, okay, if you ask me, I would suggest Omega. It's free and it's a good start as a system. If you want to go for something bigger, I would suggest Museum Plus, which is used all over Europe, or EMU as a digitization system, which is used all over the world. but can you financially support it? If you can support it financially, do you have people that can work with that? How likely it is to be able to support an initiative like this? Or if you have a digitization program which is free, how likely is that your staff has the time to support it? So putting together a strategy, it is not just, I need digitization, what do I do, what do I get? It's having the overall picture of what we have in the museum, what is out there, and start doing research on what we need. And doing research means asking people. It's a major first step. And see what other museums do. I'll show you in a while. You need to focus on digital audiences, since a digital strategy relates to digital audiences, and digital audiences are us when we go digital. A digital audience is not different from a physical audience. It's basically the same audience, but we need to relate to them digitally and to what their digital needs are. Many strategies and plans have failed simply because we think of the digital as a way to attract physical visitors. This is why most museums have Facebook accounts and Twitter and Instagram, and they just advertise their physical collections rather than doing stuff in the digital world. I'm not accusing the museums, not at all. Most of the times, there are staff shortages, funding shortages, and other issues, so that it's difficult to do it. But even before that, you need a strategy. You need to plan. You need to plan. You need to say what you want. If, for example, you want digitization, and to me that should be the first thing, then you need to not only to find out what's the best program to digitize, but also how your museum can do the digitization. You may need an extra person to work on that. You may need that amount of money, that amount of euros. You may need these machines for 2, 3, 4 years. You need to, well, the museum, by the leader, needs to sit down and look through all departments and how everybody can contribute before we move on to develop the strategy framework. We're going to do this and this and this and this. And again, this, we write it up, we get approvals, we implement, evaluate, and fine tune. Let me give you some examples of strategies. I'll stop sharing. I stop sharing the screen, and I'll use again the chat box. Just give me a second. Oh, sorry. I need to share that with everybody. In this link, you can see, well, the strategy by the Tate Gallery. And I'm also sharing with you a file that you can have a look at strategies of different organizations. Just a second. Sharing the screen again. You will see the file. In a while. Okay. You may be able to download the file right now. And well, on how you do this in practice, you need to fill in a strategy plan similar to, well, what I have here, which relates to sitting down and noting things from the strategic context on the top left, all the way down to expenditures and income. It is, how can I say it? As museum people, and most of us with a background in history, archaeology, literature, ethnography, we have not yet trained to do this. And it seems sometimes too much, or it seems not important, boring. We very frequently we have comments such as, well, basically it's down to money, just give us the money to do it, hire people to do it, what do we need, all these plans and everything and whatever. But it seems that a modern museum is an organization that it needs to relate and to operate in organizational terms. A strategic plan is something that requires this kind of work. Understanding the environment, understanding visitors as customers, understanding the context, understanding what we have and what we want to achieve, and well, for what reason. As I talk, please have a look at what I shared, the files. There are some, well, good examples there of a number of organizations on how they put down their strategies, their documents. You will see there a lot of descriptions. Description, we have that and we want this, we have that and we want this, we have that and we want this. Some of them, well, are also noting problematic aspects. What is difficult to be achieved, what, well, we need to do. You will see that some of them are very ambitious. They want to become like the Cleveland Museum, being able to offer this kind of interaction with visitors. Others, well, they are in the stage of achieving digitization and planning, well, how to digitize their collections so that they reach a state similar to the Rijksmuseum I presented. Others take for granted that they have social media and they operate. Other organizations, well, they need to invest on that in terms of time and stuff, apart from content. So it's an exercise that each and every museum, well, needs to do. I'm giving you this strategy canvas. It's from what I have seen, it's the most useful one. I'm also going to share another file with you, which is this one. Okay. And these are the official guidelines of the UK towards helping museums putting together a digital strategy. I will also add something that I have seen small museums find successful, which is this. So the last one, I mean, well, small museums find it, well, quite helpful when they actually, all I've shared is also available online, and you can easily find them. I'm sharing my screen again. It's here. Yep. I'll go back to this canvas in a second. I have a list of things here on, well, what to do. So, well, what to do towards putting this together, the digital strategy for your museum. Well, as in a book or as in something we create, well, we need a front matter, which is who, what, where, and when, similar to the file I shared you. Who is taking the responsibility of putting it together? That can be your name on behalf of your institution. What are you doing in terms of digital strategy? Are you creating a digital strategy in general for your museum? Are you creating a digital strategy for the educational programs of your museum? Are you creating a digital strategy towards your collection, which is documentation and digitization? Are you creating a digital strategy towards social media? This is the what. Where it can be your museum, and when that, well, is March 2022. So, well, the first step is that, to start something and have someone starting it. And that someone will have to involve the leadership and so on and so forth. Then there are two things on what to do. Description of current states of digital assets and the new digital strategy. In the first one, according to your what above, and that what can be digital strategy for the whole museum or for something in specific, you need to start from your museum vision and mission in general, then to involve all personnel and teams of your museum, no matter if your what relates to a big thing or a small thing, because the digital, I remind you, relates to the whole organization, whether we want it or not. So maybe you will create a strategy for your educational programs. You need to involve the whole museum again, even towards that, well, from a first view relates to only the educational team. You need to note down the current digital programs and provisions, what you already have. You need to work on your audiences and try to understand them, who is visiting your museum, both physically and digitally, and what are their needs. And you need to think of what you will gain if you have the digital strategy you put together and what you will lose. During this exercise, well, don't be surprised to find out that there were museums that decided that, well, the drawbacks are more than the benefits. So it's not the right time to do this, or maybe we need to do something else. It may sound evident, for example, to think that we need digital educational programs, but once you start checking your audiences and see what is the benefits you expect and what would be the drawbacks, maybe you realize that this is not a good idea and you may do something else first. Most museums start with a digital strategy towards having impressive applications, holograms, augmented reality, virtual reality, 3D reconstructions. And by doing this exercise, and when they go to audiences and drawbacks, they realize, in order for me to have an augmented reality application, I need a lot of digital images and a lot of digital videos of my exhibits, and I don't have them. So maybe I should forget about augmented reality and go for documentation or go for something else. Or many museums do the big mistake of getting an external company and ask the external company to do it for them, because they say, oh, it's too much. It's too much for us to do. Please come, how much do you want so that we can give you, we have a sponsor, do this application. And the company will put together an application which in a few months will become obsolete because it won't relate to audiences, it won't relate to things that have not been searched. So this part is important. And once this is done, then we move to the new digital strategy, which is what we want to do and how. So we describe what we want to achieve, and we write down real actions, what we are going to do. Again, we write down the benefits and drawbacks of what will happen, what we expect to happen. We put together action plans. We're going to do this at that time, and this person is going to do it, having all parties involved into this. and we make sure that we have an evaluation process and milestones within which we revisit the whole thing, the strategy again and again and again. It resembles to putting together an application for a European project, this how to do thing. Many things can go wrong in the process. Maybe we realize that we didn't research enough. We didn't receive a lot of information about what best to propose. Maybe we do not focus enough on our audience or their needs, and we focus on what we believe the audience will think. Number 3 is very common. We do not have enough input from senior management and departments towards what we do. So we propose something and then it stops because it's not possible to be done. Also, sometimes we do not have a clear idea of what is a significant challenge for our museum. And we move towards something which is not as important as we thought, it would be. Also, something that can go wrong is the how bit. A strategy is not just a statement. We will have digital educational programs. How is important? Involving the whole process. Who is going to do them? How much it costs? And how much time does it require? Who is involved? Also, sometimes things can go wrong when we have too many disjoint objectives, such as museum educational programs and beacons for people with for the disabled. These are 2 different projects. Maybe it's not yet the time to join them together, or we have to join them together in order for us to be successful. Poor analysis of risks. Thinking of the risks, and you will see in that chart, risks are also there. Thinking of what risks are involved and what may happen is important. We need to analyze them too and have a solution. What is going to happen if the risk becomes reality? Also, the so-called value for money, which is a big thing for digital. The latest bit of technology costs a lot of money, and 2 years later is very cheap, or it's not even there. What we need to invest on? How much will it cost? Maybe it's better not to do what is the very, very best and do something that is a step behind, and then we see how move on. It relates to checking the value for money aspect. Also, we have the ideas, we have the how. Do we have the resources to do it? Do we have the funding? If not, maybe we should concentrate on that first. Also, sometimes we take for granted that people will work on our project. In our museum, we have 3 people dealing with the digital system we have already. They can help us towards this. Well, these 3 maybe are not enough to do the job they do right now. So implementation is blocked by unrealistic staffing and unrealistic predicated, as I say here, resource plan. So having in mind, what to do and what can go wrong will help us in the process of actually putting together a canvas like this. I'm giving you here what I think is the most useful for the ones I've seen working. When I was preparing for this lecture, for this seminar, I was thinking of having you putting together a canvas like this. But then I realized that each and every one of you, well, you come from different museums, and you have different museum objectives, different visions, different missions, different needs, different stages in which you are. It seems that some museums need digitization. Others may need something else, and so on and so forth. So, well, I decided to offer an overview of what is going on out there, the latest bit, and as well as some guidance and some directions. And I would like this not to stop here. So basically, well, I would like you to give you an exercise, which if you want to, you do it. If you don't want to, you don't do it. But if you want to do it, and feel free to contact me and discuss it later under the umbrella of your own institution, because only then that would make sense. So, well, the exercise is, have a look at this presentation again. The first part relates to what the modern museum is supposed to be doing, and also with the latest trends of digital technologies. Some or all of them, you may know them already. Plus this guidance, plus the files I sent you. And for your museum, try to put together this digital strategy canvas. And then, well, once you do it, well, please feel free to send an email. And well, I'll be very glad with my team to discuss what you have put and to offer some guidance towards be practical. At the end of the day, when we actually put together a digital strategy, in the circumstances as they are right now, well, we have to be practical and we have to take into account realities. We are in a phase that every museum all over the world are changing their digital strategies. So do not feel that we are doing something that you should have done before. In the post-pandemic period that we are entering, museums have completely changed their digital strategies because we have new circumstances. And well, with the war coming, I hope it will stop, but it's another situation that may affect things. So strategizing at this point is what every museum does. ICOM in Prague in August, well, they are thinking of having special sections on strategies, given the new world we are entering. So I've tried in well, these 2 hours to offer you an overview and provide some guidelines with some points that well, need to be followed. I have shared with you some tools that I find most useful for small museums. And I encourage you by giving you this exercise for your museum, for your particular digital need and strategy, to initiate this. And well, if you feel and you want, you can contact me towards discussing it in specific. That's it from my part. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for, well, being here. Again, many thanks to the Regional Center of UNESCO in Sofia. And let me know if any questions you have in the few minutes that we have until 4 o'clock, if you have any. I stop sharing so that I can see the screen. As they do not seem to be questions right now, let me say a few more things to Christinka, and I hope I get the name right. If we need to have a digital data collection, we start from the physical. We start from the physical data we have. We start from the objects. We count the objects, how many objects we have, and we make a list of their characteristics. Are our objects 3D or 2D? Are our objects with color or without color? Can our objects move out of the museum safely, or they need to stay in the museum or even in the room we have? So we need to have a full account of the physical first before we start digitizing our collection. Yeah. Once we have the physical straight, then we need to decide on the machines we need to do the digital we want. So if we decide to do 3D scannings for that reason, or if we just want an information system, we need to buy scanners or photograph or special cameras or 3D cameras or video cameras. So the next decision is on equipment. when we decide on the equipment, we don't buy it yet. When we decide on the equipment, then we decide on staff. Who is going to do the digitization? When I say staff, it doesn't have to be museum staff. Digitizations can be done by students that are doing computer studies or museum studies, and they can do practical work. Researchers that they do their dissertations on these things. The central ministry of culture that they may have people that they do this for the ministry in order to have a national archive, depending on the country or on the situation. Once we have all these three decisions, let's say, actually the catalog of the characteristics of our collection, the machines, the staff, then we have to decide on the system, on the information system we need. Do we want the system just for our museum? Do we want something to connect what we have with the world through Europeana or through whatever? That's number 4 decision. We decide what is best. Then we take all these 4 parts and we go to the leadership and we say, this is what we think it needs to be done. Does it make sense? Does it fit to the whole thing? Tell us what we forget. Tell us what we miss. Tell us what you know and you don't tell us, because you are the leader and we are not supposed to know everything. You are supposed to know everything. Once this is it, then we start finding money, resources, and the system. Yeah. So we build the strategies by planning rather than by saying, George Papaioanu from Greece, who is supposed to be an expert on that, told us to buy Omega and buy a camera and start digitizing things and putting them there. It won't work. Maybe it will work because you want to do it, but once you decide that I found a better job in a different museum and you move on, then it will stop because it will be just something that you initiated. Yeah. This is why I shared this canvas. Yeah. Where you can find Omega? It's easy to find it online. Check online, Omega. If you search for Omega, then you can download it. If you cannot find it, send me an email. I'm not sure if there is a version in Bulgarian. That's another aspect we need to take into account. Maybe Omega is the best system, but if it's not in Bulgarian, then it's useless for you. Yeah. Or if you need someone to make it in Bulgaria, then it's again a decision that needs to be taken. Yes. Another way is to collaborate with the university, that they do these things and they can take care of it together with a cooperation with the museum. But this needs to be established through different steps. So there are kind of different ways of putting it together. Or you can create your own system, hire your own computer person, and his or her job will be to actually create the system well the way you want it. But you need to tell that person why you want the system. Is it just internal? You want to connect it with the world? You want to connect it with the National Archive? Strategy is basically more planning than actually doing. The implementation of strategy is when we do. And you know, when we implement something, we always get the question, okay, now what do I do? What's the next step? The strategy needs to provide this step. Thank you very much for everything. And I repeat, what I said, I mean it. If you feel I can be of help towards what you do, don't hesitate. And if you decide to do this exercise of the canvas and the strategy, feel free to share it. I will be very happy to discuss it with you. All the best for the rest of the seminar. All the best for your museums, whatever you do. And well, we keep in touch.